If sentient beings encounter his light, their three defilements are removed. They feel tenderness, joy, and pleasure, and good thoughts arise. If sentient beings in the three realms of suffering see this light, they will all be relieved and freed from affliction. At the end of our lives, they all reach emancipation. Namo Amidabbits, Namo Amidabbits, Namo Amidabbits, Namondaps, Namondaps, Namondaps. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Bodhi Day. Thank you for joining me today on this Bodhi Day. Obviously, we are celebrating the enlightenment of Shakyamuni Buddha today, and whether you do that by, decorating like a small tree, or whether you just take some time to sit and reflect about the different changes that have taken place in your life throughout the many years, however you choose to celebrate that, that is okay in the eyes of the Buddha. So I just want to start off by saying Happy Bodhi Day. And, it's good to see everybody. I'm glad that you're all able to join in with us here today at the Arizona Buddhist Temple. So because it is Bodhi Day, we're here to reflect on the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and his attainment of enlightenment. This is, of course, a special observance for Buddhists all over the world. Bodhi Day is a day where Jodashin, Shuzen, Tibetan, all of us gather together and reflect on the moment in time when the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, attained enlightenment. And this individual, Siddhartha, is the one who planted the seeds of the Buddhist teachings, and of course is like the guide for all of our lives and how we live our lives today. It's 2021, and if you use the traditional date of 528 BCE, we're basically observing the 2549th anniversary of the awakening of Shakyamuni Buddha. And that is a big number and a remarkable stretch of time. Those 2,549 years have seen our tradition and our beliefs grow in ways that I'm sure Shakyamuni was never able to truly predict in all finitude. It's moved across, the teachings of the Buddha have moved across many different countries, many different continents. His words have been interpreted in countless languages. And it's kind of beautiful to know that even today, we are part of that beautiful tradition that started on that day. We can string a thread from ourselves all the way back to Siddhartha Gautama, right back to the incredible moment when the Buddha walked through that door and became the enlightened one. So one of my favorite stories about Siddhartha and from all of the canon of historical Buddhism is, of course, the story of the Four Gates, which is pertinent to Bodhi Day. As a kid, this was my favorite story about the Buddha, and kind of for like weird reasons. Like I always, when I was young, I used to read a lot of comics, actually, and watched a lot of movies as a young man. I played a lot of video games in my youth. And when I was a kid, the Four Gates story kind of clicked with me, and I always appreciated it. And I think the reason that I appreciated the Four Gates story so much was because when I thought about it, it's kind of like the origin story of the Buddha. And specifically, it's kind of like almost like a superhero origin story in a lot of weird sort of ways. You know, like how a superhero sort of gets their powers and that kind of thing. Like if the Buddha were a superhero, the Four Gates would kind of be like the inciting incident, the thing that drives him to change the world, right? He isn't like bitten by a radioactive spider. He isn't trapped in a cave by the Taliban. His alien planet is not destroyed, nothing like that. But every good hero sees struggle, right? And encounters conflict in the world. And they internalize that conflict. They rise to that challenge. And they vow to do something about it. And if you think about the story of the Four Gates, it checks all of those boxes quite nicely, I would say. So, a little crash course in the story that I'm talking about if you don't know. But Prince Siddhartha was, of course, born to a very wealthy family. He lived in a beautiful, ornate castle in northern India. His every need was accommodated in this castle. Every desire he had was fulfilled. He wanted for nothing. And more than that, his father, ever the perfectionist, made sure that all the unpleasantries of daily life were completely removed from the premises of this castle, so that he never encountered them. Now, that being said, young Siddhartha is a curious young lad, and he decides that he's going to explore a bit. He gets the, let's call it the intellectual itch. And at the age of 29, he's been married and he has a child. And he's seen everything in the castle, and he decides he wants to see what's outside the castle. So he slips out one day, right, undetected, to see exactly what's going on out there. And the things he sees shock him. They absolutely shock him. They shake him to his core. On the first day, Siddhartha leaves the castle from the east gate, and he sees a bustling city full of merchants and children and families and all these colorful different sights and sounds. But then all of a sudden he encounters something that he's never seen before, and it's a toothless old man. He's bent over, he's crippled, he's old, right? He's very old, and he's walking slowly with a cane. And this sticks with him because in the castle there are no elderly people, right? The king makes sure that they are not there. He doesn't have to encounter that. So this is all new for Siddhartha. He asks himself, upon seeing this old man for the first time, that happens to all people? Like that's going to happen to me one day? Well, he takes that in and he goes back to the castle. And then on another day, he leaves from the castle again, right? This image of the old man still fresh in his mind. And this time he leaves through the south gate. And this time it's not an old man that he sees, but a sick person, right? He's ill, his lungs are filled with fluid, the color has rushed from his cheeks, and he's struggling to breathe, right? And it occurs to him when he sees this that this could happen to anybody, including himself as well. And this also shakes him, makes him question everything. All people are subject to declining health, to illness, right? Now, sometime later, he of course journeys into the city again, this time through the west gate, and this time he witnesses a funeral, the end of life, all the hopes and dreams of someone vanishing up into the air, into smoke, right? Their families weeping, they're longing for them to return. 3 trips, right? 3 world-changing sights, sounds, understandings, back to back to back. And this, of course, shakes Siddhartha to his core, right? Because up until this point, all he's ever seen is the pleasantries of life. He's been totally sheltered from this view. And he comes to realize that not only will this happen to him, but to everyone on the planet. It is inevitable. Suffering is inevitable. Death is inevitable. Sometime later, Siddhartha, of course, makes another venture into the city. And this time he goes out the north gate. But this time, it's not a funeral. It's not the infirm, right? It's not the ill that he finds. But he finds an ascetic, a monk, who's doing practices. Begging, sure, but searching for something as well. And it is shortly after this that he digs deep within himself and vows to leave the palace and, like the monk, try to find the answers to the deepest, most central of life's questions. Suffering, life, sickness, death. This is the origin story of Siddhartha. This is where it starts. Before that, he's a prince, sure, but at this point in time, he recognizes the problem and he rises to meet it. He understands that he has to rise to meet it. I mean, you know the rest of how this goes, right? Siddhartha, of course, spends the next 6 years living as an ascetic and eventually abandoning those practices. He later learns to nourish his body. He sits beneath the Bodhi tree, awakens to the reality of the world around him. And of course, at this time, he understands the nature of impermanence of suffering, universal oneness, deep within himself. He understands all of it. He becomes an enlightened being. And of course, the rest is history. The Buddhist cinematic universe is, of course, born that we are living in today. And this famous story of the prince's exit is through the 4 gates, right? It's known as the story of the 4 gates. And if the Buddha were a superhero, this would be the start of his journey. And it does kind of feel like a superhero origin story in a lot of ways, doesn't it? Like the young prince has the entire world shaken, and he realizes he must rise to the occasion, fulfill his calling, right? For the benefit of all humanity. I'm kind of, taking it lightly there. But what it is not really a superhero story, right? It's actually something much more than that, and something much more personal than that, especially to us, right? because it's the Buddhism origin story. It's the beginning of all these traditions that we hold so valuable, these traditions as we know them. The four gates, Siddhartha's awakening beneath the Bodhi tree, constitute the birth of all that we know about the history of Buddhism, all that we know about the teaching, and as a result of that, all that we hold dear in terms of the philosophies that guide our life, the teachings that guide our life. Let's be realistic. The beginning of these Buddhist teachings are, in a lot of ways, the reason we are here today. Okay? In this story, the beginning of the Buddhist teachings, right, the story of the Four Gates, is not just Siddhartha's story, but it's your story, and it's my story as well, right? It's the story of our ancestors and our communities. It's the story of the teachings that have guided us from generations, right? It's essentially like the reason that we are having this conversation, or you're listening to my words today, and that you sought out the desire, the need to hear the teachings of the Buddha today on a Bodhi Day with all these other Buddhists around the world. I mean, we owe everything to this moment in time in this regard. The faces that you see when you attend a temple, right, whether it's on Zoom or whether you actually go and physically, again, they're not going to be there without what Siddhartha accomplished. The teaching I'm expressing today cannot be shared, they cannot be heard without that. Gone are the works of Shinran, of Honen, of Nagarjuna. There is no temple to gather at, no memories formed as a result of all of the Sangha does. Nothing is there in that whole, in that absence. The people do not come to the temple, right? And again, all these things don't come into being as we understand them. But more than anything, there is no end to the world of suffering, no answers to the questions of death, sickness, and loss, right, and attachment. There is no means of finding release from the world of samsara, and all individuals are, committed terminally to swim in the sea of samsara forever and ever and ever without hope, without any means of ending, escaping this cycle. But that's not the case because of Siddhartha. It's all because of Siddhartha, because of who he was and what he did. Siddhartha, who sits beneath the Bodhi tree, reaches deep within himself and awakens as Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha, who, through compassion and infinite light and life, assures birth in the Pure Land to every single one of us. We foolish beings. Shakyamuni Buddha, of course, whose kindness saves each and every one of us because we cannot do it ourselves, because of our own limitations. Shakyamuni Buddha, whose teachings have laid the groundwork for us to be here today with the people that we care the most about. It makes you feel a deep sense of gratitude, at least it makes me feel a deep sense of gratitude on a day like today, Bodhi Day, right? That you can think about how a story that took place thousands of years ago still impacts us, and we can thread the needle that connects those moments to our own lives in ways that aren't academic, but personal, but real. And knowing that this is something that Buddhists all around the world are doing at this exact moment with one another, putting their hands together and saying the Buddha's name. Thank you for listening. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namon Dabs, Namon Dabs, Namon Dabs.